And we're live.
Welcome to the CLE group chat. Today is October 7, 2017, and my name is Joshua. With us, we have Jeannie from Australia, Daedric from Georgia, and from Indiana, we have Christopher, who started this ministry. And we're only allowing our church group on these video calls, but you can watch and use the live chat box or even share this video with family and friends to watch it with you live. Now, if you're watching recording but would like to watch it live and chat with other viewers, make sure you subscribe and click the bell, and that should notify you when we're live so you can do that. And without further ado, we have an article from 11 Warriors, and it's titled, well, keep in mind this is from June 20th, so it's a ways back, but so it's not related to, because it's about football, and it's not related to the national anthem. It's just happens to be about football and how they're kneeling during national anthems. If you're not aware of that, you can go back to the previous Google Hangout we did about that, which is the Google Hangout before this, but it continues. The title is, I hope I don't get killed for being black today. And it doesn't make a lot of sense because you don't see the article, you don't see the picture. So I have the picture here, and that's the guy. He just has a t-shirt. His t-shirt says, I hope I don't get killed. I can tell you already,
I can't relate.
Relate? What do you mean by that?
Well, I'm white and I'm not dead, so let's see what he has to say.
Yep. So, yeah. Cleveland Heights 4-star defensive end Tyreek Smith didn't have much to prove during Ohio State's Monday camp on Saturday, as he's already one of the most sought-after prospects in the country. In addition to holding an offer from the Buckeyes programs such as Alabama. Florida,
they were saying he didn't have much to prove because he's a really bad football player.
No, yeah, I agree, but I mean, he's supposedly really good. But anyway, it says such as Alabama, Florida, Georgia, LSU, Michigan, Notre Dame, Oklahoma, Oregon, Penn State, Texas, UCLA, and USC are pulling out all the stops to get him to commit. Smith showed up anyway and used the camp as an opportunity to mingle with Ohio State commits and potentially his future teammates, Emory Jones, Jalen Gill, and Dallas Gant. He also spent a significant amount of time with defensive line coach Larry Johnson, who pulled him to the side for some one-on-one instruction. But none of that was the talk of the camp. Instead, it was Smith's shirt that grabbed everyone's attention. The shirt said, I hope I don't get killed for being black today. That's a powerful message from a 17-year-old kid. We shouldn't even have to worry about losing his life, or he shouldn't have to worry about losing his life. But that's also a reality for so many young African Americans across the country. Smith lives in a...
Show me that picture one more time.
Yeah, sure.
Out of curiosity, just put it up there real quick.
Yep. Here we go. Can you see that?
White t-shirt. Doesn't that seem contradictory? Shouldn't it be a black t-shirt?
Maybe you have a point there. And the article continues. But that's also a reality for so many young African Americans across the country. Smith lives in a county that saw a state-high 168 homicides last year, and he wants to use his platform as a star athlete to make a positive...
What had 168? I didn't catch that.
His county had a state high of 168 homicides.
Did he bother to do any research and find out how many of those were black-on-black crime?
I don't think it says that. It does mention something about he includes that. He includes that.
Oh, really? Okay, let's go and find out.
Yeah. And it continues. I decided to wear the shirt because I wanted to bring attention to the epidemic of blacks being killed at an alarming rate, Smith said. What we would like to do is have people talk about these issues to reduce the murder rate of African Americans. Now, before you rush to judgment, understand that Smith isn't just talking about the Cleveland police officer who fatally shot 12-year-old Kamea Rice and other examples of police brutality that seemingly dominate the headline news. He's also talking about black-on-black crime that is destroying his city brick by brick. And that's the part about black-on-black.
So he does actually mention that. So now I'm confused because my impression that I originally got, and I was being a little sarcastic at first, only because I thought he was doing this as a thing like stop killing blacks because blacks don't do anything wrong, right? Because that tends to be like the message that most of them are communicating. Isn't that what we've been seeing a lot in the media? So if this is like the message he's communicating, hey, I'm recognizing that the black communities are having a huge problem with killing each other, and that's why I'm wearing this T-shirt. Am I getting? Is that the right impression that he's giving?
That's the way the article makes it sound. Yes.
Really? Because that's actually pretty rare to see someone doing that. So now I'm interested. Please tell me more.
Tyreek's older brother, Malik, said the shirt was created to bring light into the everyday problems that blacks face between police and black-on-black crimes. The shirt exemplifies a voice that we have but may not be heard, so why not have people see it? Saturday's camp with hundreds of prospects, parents, and reporters in attendance was the perfect time for that to happen. Smith knew he would be photographed and that it would create instant conversation on social media.
You know, what just occurred to me is that it might not be, the statistics on there might not necessarily be fair, because if a black police officer shoots a black criminal, that's counted both as a double statistic. If you just stop and think about it.
Yeah. He continues. He asked me if he could, he asked me if he should wear it, and I said, yes, absolutely, Tyreek, Malik said, explaining how he was the one who made the shirt. I told him to be ready for people to voice their opinion about the shirt, good or bad. I also told him to be ready to have an answer and to be able to fully explain the shirt in great detail. He did just that.
I hope first and foremost he makes it prevalent of the black on black crime and not so much as the police brutality. You know, now don't get me wrong. I know the subject, you know, like the back of my hand. You know, I'm well aware of the police brutality. I'm well aware of that in America. I'm also well aware of, you know, how much of a detriment the black on black crime is doing. And, you know, the problem is that while you have, you know, the guys like Colin Kaepernick and guys in the NFL who wants to sit there and kneel at the national anthem because of police brutality in America, you know, on colored people, you know, that's like a kick in the face, you know, because you're sitting here and you're going after, you know, the police officers for brutalizing colored people. What you're not doing is going, you know, protesting against, you know, colored people who are brutalizing other colored people, you know, and then on top of that, they don't help the police, you know, solve any of those crimes. A lot of them go for street justice, you know, and that doesn't make it any better. That makes it harder for the police to do their job.
Let me put this in terms, like what Daedric's saying is really good. I want you to continue, but let me put this in terms and try to help people understand. And maybe we'll try to help the black community. Anybody who's listening is a black person that maybe like, oh, I don't know about any of this. Let me try to explain this to you in a way that you might understand, okay? About why let's say there are, now I don't know all the statistics, but let's say it's true. Let's say there's a high rate of police officers shooting black people, okay? First of all, we understand that the criminal, or at least the crime rates are higher in the black communities, number one. But let's say you, as a black person, were put on policing duty in the middle of downtown Baghdad. Okay, let's just say that, for instance, you know, someplace like one of those, like in Afghanistan, a town in Afghanistan, someplace like that, you were put on policing duty in a place that you know there is high active crime of Muslims. There's a high amount of rate of rapes and murders and things like that are going on in that area. But your job is to try to keep the peace and protect people's rights, right? So when you're driving down these streets, they could kill you at any moment. You're actually at a threat to lose your life if they are disgruntled at you from one way because you know that you might have offended their God Allah, right? So now you are fearing for your life constantly when you're driving down these streets. And when you stop somebody in the middle of some sort of crime, Jeannie, you actually unmuted your mic to cough. Okay, so there's a habit of muting your mic to do it. Instead, you just unmuted it. So anyway, the thing is, if okay, so what's happening is you're now fearing for your life, and when you stop, they could decide to kill you at any moment just because you want, you know, they feel like you're offending them in some way, or that you're against them in some way, when you're really just trying to stop the crime and keep the peace. And you being nervous and fearing for your life because you want to go home alive and you want to be able to go home and see your family, they reach into their pocket to pull something out, and you don't know whether they've got a gun or not, especially if this is in a nighttime situation. Typically, I mean, you can warn them, but if you're firing to protect your own life, I mean, there's that issue that has to be considered. So what a lot of these people, at least I believe that people in the Black communities are not doing, is putting themselves in the position of police officer. For just 10 seconds, put yourself in their shoes, that they are also people that have families and they want to make it home that night. The only difference is that in a lot of those instances, not all instances, because I know there's police corruption, I've seen it, I don't argue against that, okay? But in a number of instances, these are police officers that are doing a routine call, whatever it is, it's a routine call, routine traffic stop, whatever it is, and they simply want to go home alive to their families that night. And so when one of these people will act strangely towards them, or as soon as they, stop them for a moment, somebody takes off and running, that's also illegal. You're not supposed to run from the police, or, reaches in their jacket to pull something out without even saying what it is that they're doing. These guys are fearing for their lives and retaliating. It's not because they're racist. It's because they want to protect their lives, and they know they're in an area of crime that's 20 times higher than an area one of their coworkers works in, right? Because one of the guys I used to work security with, he was a manager of security over the complex we were working at. He was an ex-police officer, and he basically lost his job because he wasn't willing to play according to the good old boys club, which means, there was corruption that was going on at the top levels, and he tried to expose it, and he got kicked out for it. Okay. The guy ended up writing a book about it and all that. I forget what it's called, but he was exposing that police corruption. And at first he was telling them that, that they needed to stop this stuff, and he was threatened. And here's what they said. They told him, they said, if you take this any further and you start talking to anybody about this, what we're going to do, because they weren't going to fire him at first, they weren't going to get rid of him, because the police kind of protect themselves on that. But at the same time, they said, we will put you on the third shift out in the ghetto. And basically for them, that was kind of half a death sentence at that point. And he knew what that meant. He did not want to be stuck out in the middle of the night out in these black neighborhoods, because that's where he was going to end up being stuck at. And that's what they gave him that threat, because the crime rates are way higher. And that means that the fear of dying of a police officer would be much higher when they have to work those areas, but they have to be worked by somebody. So I want to throw out a couple of those comments. Sorry, Deja, I wasn't trying to interrupt you there.
No, it's good that you said all of that. If anything, the people in the Black community, they should understand that first and foremost. Think about it like this. A lot of the times when the police officers are doing an investigation to figure out who did what, nobody says anything because they fear for their lives. They feel that if they're a snitch, somebody will come after them and kill them too. So it's the same thing, around in a circle, maybe different circumstances, but at the same time, you're fearing for your life. So with that being said, you're taking certain precautions to do certain things. First and foremost, they should understand, people in the Black community, they should understand that. What irks me is the fact that, a lot of them buy into the media. They don't take the time to even think about those things first and foremost. On top of that, it's a bad cycle all the way around, because for those who do understand the situation, we're sitting back and we're looking, we're saying, can't you guys see what's going on? Let me go ahead and let Josh continue, because I could go on all day and all night on this.
And the article continues. The response to Smith's actions have been overwhelmingly positive, with 7 out of every 10 replies to his tweet showing support. Naturally, some are also not so kind. They are speaking negatively because they don't understand what's going on and the message behind it, Tyreek said, noting he understands that not everyone will share his opinion. But then again, some people don't live in constant fear of someone taking their life. They don't have to worry about being shot for being out too late, or simply being in the wrong place at the wrong time. To see or hear about so many
For
senseless.
someone having to worry about being shot for being out too late, talk to just about any black teenage girl that lives out in the ghetto, and then you can talk to someone who fears being shot for being out too late.
And that reminds me of that video you posted on the forum a while back of that black guy talking to one of these protesters, saying that he was 20 times more likely to be shot in his own neighborhood than he was in New York because he lived in a black neighborhood, and he was this black guy, he said he was 20 times more likely to be shot in his own neighborhood walking down the street than he would be in downtown Manhattan.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I mentioned that last week on the last Saturday's chat, but the thing that I'm pointing out is that it's not only because the girl that I mentioned, you know, the average black teenage girl, you ask her about that, it's not about just that. It's about, I mean, she could be raped. I mean, a lot of these girls, they won't walk down a street like that in the ghetto because they know better, you know, in the middle of the night. So talk about, you know, being out too late and getting punished for that. I mean, the police are the worst, are the least of your problems at that point. I mean, really, I'm not kidding. The police are the absolute least of your problems, because I heard a guy one time who's a very wealthy man, one time, black guy, who had earned a lot of his wealth. I mean, multi-million-dollar, you know, business owner. And he was being pitched an idea, and they said, "We think you'll find this exciting." He goes, "Exciting? If you want exciting, try wearing an expensive piece of jewelry and walk down at nighttime through the neighborhood that I grew up in. I'll give you exciting, okay? It'll give you all the excitement you'll ever want, because somebody's going to stop you and try to mug you and take your stuff." He says, because that's the kind of neighborhood he grew up in. He's used to that too. And every time I hear, I mean, not every single time, because I'm not saying that every black person in America grows up in some of these poor neighborhoods like this, like these black communities that are like this. I'm not saying every single one of them do, but the majority of them I've listened to talk about the way they grew up. They will make comments exactly like that, but then turn around and say the police are the entire problem. And that doesn't make any sense.
Exactly, you know, and it's funny because a lot of them, if they ever came into fortune or any kind of money, you know, they would say the same thing. You know, most they wouldn't live in those neighborhoods either. You know, they would leave immediately. They would come on.
Where are the cops?
So, like, you know, you want to talk about, you know, the cops being the main problem. You know, I'm telling you, if any of the people in my neighborhood came into some kind of like fortune, they would leave immediately.
Dude, they would go, what they would do, they would go move to the neighborhood the police officer lives in.
Yes, exactly. For the exact same reason of, you know, of what you were talking about, of the dangers of being in the neighborhood. Just, you know, it's funny how, you know, everybody talks about racism in a negative, in such a negative light when it comes to, you know, the police officers and, you know, from the black community, even white people. But you know, they don't ever see and try to put the shoe on they don't ever, you know, look at themselves to say, hey, am I in some kind of way racist as well? Yes, you are. You know, just by the way you grew up, you wouldn't stay in certain neighborhoods. You wouldn't do certain things, you know, where you live. You know, I'm going to go ahead and let you continue, Just. Like I said, I can go on all night and day with this.
There's somebody named Virginia on here that made a comment on the chat I'm going to respond to. She said, I think a lot of cops are trigger happy. They shoot and ask questions later. I'm not saying that doesn't happen in America anywhere, but I'm saying in most instances that doesn't happen. Otherwise, people would be getting murdered left and right all the time. The fact of the matter is, if you stop somebody and suddenly two of his gang members appear out and you're surrounded and they pull guns out on you, yeah, you are going to shoot and ask questions later, because it doesn't matter at that point. What matters is that your life is on the line. So what I'm asking people to do is consider both sides of the issue, okay? The police officers do, I mean, when you stop somebody, even on a routine traffic stop, you don't know if somebody in there is some demon-possessed crazy person that's just going to decide to do something like what Two Gun Crowley did one time. He was stopped for a routine traffic stop for a taillight that was out, and he walked up to the car. Two Gun Crowley pulls out a gun, a pistol, and shoots the police officer right in the face. So that kind of stuff is what we don't hear about in the media near as much as we hear about in the media a trained police officer shooting people. And they say, well, that's because police officers are shooting people at a more rapid rate here. Well, that might be because police officers are trained to handle those situations. You're taking trained police officers against untrained people who are criminals, right? So that kind of stuff, they can defend themselves more, but they are going to defend themselves. So like I said, I'm not saying there's no police corruption. In fact, the same person, like I just said, who was an ex-cop, he showed the police corruption. He told me about it. I've worked with multiple ex-military people that told me about corruption, multiple ex-cops that have told me about the corruption. I know what's going on. I know about some of the cops that are selling drugs in some of these towns and doing to get extra money on the side. I know that kind of stuff is taking place. But on the other hand, on some of these issues, a lot of them are fighting for their lives out there because around every corner there is another black person waiting to shoot one of those police officers just because they don't like them, because they believe the media lie that all police officers, they just hate black people. There are black police officers. What are you talking about? This doesn't make any sense. It's fighting this this somehow racist ghost that doesn't seem to exist, right? And I'm not saying there are no racist people. Don't misunderstand. They are. But the majority of the racist people are in the social justice warriors.
Another thing I want to caveat off on too is so yes, you know, I first of all I will say yes, police corruption it exists. But then, you know, you got to also worry about, you know, there are some people who get stopped by the police and they're disgruntled and they give the police attitude. That makes their job harder. You know, that leads to a person getting taken down and put in handcuffs. And then, you know, and that's very, very prevalent within the black community. You know, they already have this preconceived idea that the cop is after me and he's going to do this to me. And instead of cooperating, he's giving him attitude. That happens a lot. And then on the media, it shows that, hey, this cop beat this person. You know, here's the clips, here's this, that, and that, everything. You know, you don't get the full story all the time.
You know, it's interesting, Daedric,
So,
those same people, what they'll do is they'll go into a courtroom, right? Some of these black people go into a courtroom and suddenly they're respectful, right? Some of them are nice and pressed and they're sitting properly and they're quiet and they're listening and they're yes, Your Honor, no, Your Honor, all that stuff. Why is it that they don't do the same with a police officer? They'll do it with a judge, but the police officers are the judges on foot. But they won't do it with them because they don't, I mean, the same authority, I mean, the judge may have different duties, but it's still the same law that the judge is upholding that the police officer is supposed to be upholding. And the Bible tells us to respect all that, right? And even to mention the comment about, you know, being out too late and the dangers of those things, even Kevin on a chat here, he was saying that, because he's from New Zealand, and was it Dunedin, New Zealand? He says you wouldn't walk around town in the early hours of morning. That would be looking to get beaten up and robbed. So when they're making these comments about, and that's why I want to stop and make a comment about that. Okay, well, you know, you're just they're getting shot because they're out too late. You've got to be joking, okay? Learn to blame the police officers for you being shot because you're out too late. Are you kidding me? Most of those people that are out too late, they're out too late because that's when all the criminal activity is going on in the middle of the night. And that's the real reason. That's the majority reason right there that people will not go out at night. They don't go out. They don't say, God, you know, okay, let's say the mother with her children. Son, no, don't go out right now. There's cops out there. No one does that. I guarantee you in these black communities, no one does that. They say, don't go out there because that such and such a gang is running out there right now, and it's a black gang or a Mexican gang or something like that. 9 times out of 10, that's what it is. And that's the threat that they tell them don't go out there for. It's not, whoa, you better not go out there. There's police patrolling the area. They're incredibly dangerous. Don't leave your home. They never do that.
The article continues. To see or hear about so many senseless killings, it tends to have a negative impact on you, Tyreek said. You start to wonder if we should move away, but most, why? Tyreek, with nearly 40 scholarship offers to his name, has the chance to remove himself from the situation. He'll get a world-class education and have a chance to make millions of dollars in the National Football League. But not everyone in Cleveland has the same outlet.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what, if they want to believe that, I have a suggestion. why don't you pack up, leave the United States, and move to Cuba or Colombia or some other place like that where they have a nice, neat, packed away bunch of gang members and criminal activity going on all over the place and communist governments and things like that, and see how well they can protect you and see how peacefully you can live there. Why don't you try that? That's what I would suggest to them.
I think the biggest reasons for the crimes are a lack of parenting, community policing, and valuing education, Tyreek said, who wisely, beyond his years, acknowledged his family, coaches, and teachers for their influences on his life.
That I will go ahead and agree with. A lot of people in the Black community, they grow up without father figures. That does happen. I was talking to my folks the other day. You know, a cousin of mine, she's pregnant. You know, with somebody's child. I don't know if the guy continues to support and stay with her. You know, she's really young. She's like 18, 20, 21. But it's things like that that lead to problems later. And, young mothers, without a father figure to help support their child, help raise that child, that plays a big part. Because guess who's going to help raise that child? The streets. He's going to be out and he's going to be, of course, he's going to be probably living in one of these neighborhoods that are very dangerous. His mother's probably going to be, struggling to support him and herself. And, he's going to look to the streets, like, hey, how are some of these other guys, how are they making it big? What are my friends doing to get their money? It's things like that, that it's a repeated cycle that, has been going on for years and has even gotten bigger throughout the years. Because it wasn't as bad, maybe if you were to go 30, 40 years down the line, it's gotten way worse now. It's for stuff like that, is these repeated cycles that just grow and grow and they build. And, people wonder, well, where does it come from? Well, where does it come from? A lot of the problems within the Black community is because of the Black community. And that's what people need to realize. It's not because of the police officers. It's not because of white people. It's not so much because of racism. I'm not going to say that those things never had a helping hand, but a lot of the problems that are now here today from the Black community has been from the Black community not doing what they need to do, to support their families, to make sure that certain things are right, and it's stuff like that that people need to realize, that at the end of the day, those are the prevalent factors. That's what's causing the problems, not so much as the police officers coming and killing and destroying, Black people, because that's very, very, very minimal compared to the violence that goes on within the Black community from other Black people.
You see, and I would say that because I grew up in a prevalent white community. I mean, there's like almost no one out here of any other ethnicity than Indiana country white out here, and out here is very rare if a young girl, like a teenage girl, was pregnant outside of marriage out here. It did happen, but it didn't happen very often. And so those statistics growing up showed me that it was way better than the statistics from the Black communities. So what I'm seeing is that what the white communities would do is set a better example. And I think part of the problem is that the Black community are distinguishing themselves as a Black community. That's part of the problem. Instead of distinguishing themselves as Americans and trying to learn, okay, if there's a better way to do things, let's do things a better way. But instead of doing things a better way, they're like, no, we're Black, proud to be Black. And then they separate themselves and they segregate themselves, by the way. Because if you want to say that that the Black communities don't segregate themselves, you got to be kidding me. They do. And it's sad that happens, but it's never really bothered me, because I'm the kind of person that, I wasn't a teenager till I remember seeing the first time I ever saw a Black person, because out here there were none. And then, but I never had any problem with it. I had a lot of questions. I remember one of the friends I had for a short time, because she moved away, but it was when I was like, I don't know, I was like 16 or 17, I think 17. And I had a friend who was a black girl in the church I went to. And the church I went to was primarily white too. This is like the only black family that lived there. And I had tons of questions. Like one of the first questions I asked her was like, do you ever get sunburnt? I remember asking her that. And some people were kind of nervous, like, Chris, why would you ask them that question? Like, that's an important question. I'm like, it makes sense. Like, I get sunburnt real easy because I'm the whitest person that you'll ever see. But if somebody's black, do they get sunburnt ever? And then I asked her, and she thought about it. She goes, no, I don't think I've ever been sunburnt. She's like, I don't really know what that is. I've heard of it, but now that I think about it, I don't even know what that is. I was like, it's horribly painful. And then I think it was a few weeks later, she had taken a trip somewhere, and she'd gone out to the beach and stayed out there for a while. And she's like, I actually got sunburnt on my foot. She says, I never experienced that before. It hurt horribly. I said, now imagine that all over your body. And she's like, I can't imagine that. So yeah, I was curious about tons of stuff that I wanted to ask. And so like people all get all nervous about that. I've never been a person that was nervous about that. But the point being that what those communities are doing are segregating themselves a lot. And even then, I remember, because there was a time that, because I was never interested in proms and stuff like that for high schools. And the only reason I had considered going to one was I thought about taking her. And so I wrote her a letter because she was getting close to moving or something. I wrote her a letter about possibly going with her. Well, we discussed it. And number one, her family, her parents didn't like the fact that I was white. But far be it from any black person to be racist, you know. They didn't like the fact that I was white. And number two, when we talked about it, we're like, well, I go to a primarily white school, because she was homeschooled, you see. So she didn't have a prom to go to. And I said, my school's primarily white. I'm not very popular in that, meaning I have zero popularity and people hate me. And if I brought a black girl to a prom, it probably would have ended bad for both of us. So we decided not to do it. And so when people talk about the racism, I've seen it on both sides, number one. But number two, what I see today are a lot of black people in denial that any racism is coming from their side, which is absurd. Now, I don't want to include people like Daedric in that, because Daedric's never been like that, ever. Not that I've ever seen. So I'm not talking about all of them. I'm just saying the ones that they hold on to these tight-knit black communities like they are some sort of segregated thing that's holy and sacred outside of anybody else, when the crime rates are exponentially high in those places.
I know segregation is kind of, I can sort of understand it because they've grown up with it. Now, I grew up in the 60s and early 70s, and I lived in the suburbs of Detroit. And I remember, you know, I was born in Detroit. I lived in Detroit when I was a small kid. But a lot of times, you know, you had these white neighborhoods, and as soon as the first black family moved into that neighborhood, white people would leave.
That's Detroit too, like crime capital of the world, right? Not of the world anymore. I mean, at one time, it probably could have been at one point, with the amount of mafia violence going on in places like that.
The article continues. Smith knows the shirt, which can be purchased through direct message on Twitter, isn't going to put an end to the killing of black men and children in the inner cities. But if it
will make some t-shirt producing company a lot of money.
Yeah. But if it brings the slightest bit of awareness, then he used his platform for good. And that's more than we should have to ask from a 17-year-old kid. We need to come together as a unit and stop coming after our own people, Malik said. We have to work together. End of article. So were there any more thoughts on that article before we go on?
If there anything that people need to come together on as far as the black community, they need to let their youth know the truth on the violence of of black on black crimes, of the violence in America when it comes to black people. Growing up, I remember the biggest thing that we watched growing up was Black History Month, was all the inventions and all the segregation and all the stuff that happened back within the 1940s, 50s and 60s, when it came to segregation and the struggle that they had to go through between the racism and the Jim Crow laws and all of that. That is the first thing that you were probably that I was taught in my household when it came to racism, and all of that. It wasn't the black on black crime that didn't come until much later, and that wasn't something that I was taught. That was something that I found out on my own. Just being out and about and living out and about. If anything, I would have to add is if you want to change a society, you got to start from the ground up. You're not going to change the people who are already living. They're doing what they're doing because of the way they were brought up. If anything, I would say that if you want to help within the black community, is you need to start with the younger generation and get them aware of those prevalent problems and start fixing it from there. Because teaching them about the segregation of America, all that does, the way that they do it in the Black History Month, all it does is keep it alive. It really does. It's really
they're slaves. Like, we have to teach every one of our children, hey, you know what? Your great 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 grandfather was a slave. That means you are too.
Now, Dedrick, tell me if I'm wrong. Okay. I was going to say something and I just completely forgot what it was.
Well, while you're trying to remember it, the thing is, what I want the black communities to start teaching their children is actually the truth of the Word of God. That primary foremost. Just teaching them on violence isn't going to be enough for this, because what they need to stop doing is teaching them to jump around and dance around and hoop and holler in these church buildings, acting literally like monkeys when they jump around. And don't tell me they don't, because I have been in them and I have seen them do it, and this is exactly what they do. They need to stop teaching them those almost like African tribal ritual things they bring into these church buildings, and actually start teaching the truth of the Word of God. If they would start doing that, you'd see, I mean, it doesn't matter what color you are. If you have the truth of the Word of God, the Holy Spirit can clean up your life in amazing ways. But people have to come to repentance, and they need to have repentance, and that's going to take humility. And it doesn't take this, well, I'm proud to be in this, whatever color of whatever, okay? Because the Bible says repeatedly that the proud heart, a lying tongue, those kind of things, God hates those things. They're an abomination to him. And that pride cometh before a fall, and destruction cometh before a haughty spirit. So those kind of things need to be gotten rid of by everybody, and so that way people's souls can be saved. And that's the only way they're really going to change anything.
I know this is a kind of a change of subject, but what he's saying to also add on to that is, yes, that is also a big prevalent problem within the black community. One thing that I know for a fact is most of them, they feel that if they go to church once a day out of the week, that somehow cleanses them and make them saved, and then they're all holy for like the next 24 hours, and then they'll go do something crazy and stupid, and then they'll be back on Sunday. Oh, that makes me holy and praised and saved again. That is something that is also a prevalent problem within the black community that I think needs to change within all communities. The Word of God is first and foremost, and that should be the first and foremost thing on your heart. Back in foundations, you teaching your kids stuff like that, you won't have to worry about racism or the problems in the neighborhoods, because then they'll have the foundation of God on them. So yes, it's a very good point there.
Okay, I remember what I was going to say. Now tell me, is it still true that black people try to keep each other down? Like, as soon as they try to go out and get an education or to get a job or start a business or try to be prosperous, that they're accused of being a traitor to their race and working within the white man's system. I know that used to be, I used to hear that a lot when I was younger.
To a degree, yes. For example, this is just an example. If you have a black-owned business, seated next to a white-owned business, and you're black and you go to the white-owned business because their product and their service is better, you know, some people will look at that and be like, why are you going to his business, not our business? You know, that kind of thing. Uh, so to a degree, yes, I can't argue against that. Uh, that is something that is, you know, I'm not going to say it's prevalent within the black community. Not that I've seen, I haven't seen that in years, but you know, that is something that, yes, I've heard of. And yes, that is in a way true. Some people feel that if you, uh, like a lot of black people, they are successful. There are a lot of black people that are very, very successful and they get out of those neighborhoods, you know. Uh, some people feel that because they've gotten out of the neighborhoods that they've, you know, kind of lost their roots and lost, you know, how they've grown up and stuff like that. So yes, in a way, that's true. I haven't seen it in a while though.
Yeah, but even when they move out, they don't ever move back. Even with their they don't move back, buy a bunch of houses and build a multi-million-dollar home right in the middle of that area. They don't do that. And there's really good reasons for it too. They know it's too dangerous to go back there. They absolutely know that. So it's a matter of, well, I won't comment further on that. We'll just let it go.
So the next article isn't related, but perhaps we'll go on to it. An article from The Independent titled, "Mother Speaks Out About Hating Her Third Child and Hoping He Dies in His Sleep. I feel guilty about it," she said. An anonymous mother has admitted that she hates her third child and wishes he would die in his sleep. She explained that she loves her two daughters, aged 6 and 8, and yet is unable to find any affection for her son, who is the youngest. The desperate mother took to Reddit to ask fellow parents for advice. However, the post has since been taken down.
Yeah, but are they going to give a reason? Like, is it that he eats too many sandwiches? Like maybe she really likes sandwiches and he's eating all the sandwiches in the house? Because that I can understand. I can relate to that. I eat a lot of sandwiches if I get the opportunity.
Does she hate him because he's a boy?
No woman can be sexist. This is about sandwiches. Continue, Josh.
She claimed to get pregnant with her son by mistake, and it wasn't until 4 months into the pregnancy that she realized she was expecting a child, by which time an abortion was out of the question. She hoped that prenatal complications might require her to have an emergency abortion. However, her pregnancy ran smoothly and she unwillingly gave birth to a healthy baby boy. The mother explained that she feigned joy when he was born and felt like she couldn't give him up for adoption because she was afraid of what her other children would think. She also claims to have been made redundant. And redundant is a British term that means no longer employed because there's no more work available, basically laid off. So she claims to have been made redundant when she was 36 weeks into the pregnancy, which only exacerbated her
Does she have a
anxiety.
husband? I'm gonna take a guess and say no.
She does.
She has a husband.
Yeah, and it says that, yeah.
Okay, I'll just keep listening then.
Her anxiety is about having, a child. Yeah. "I honestly hated him for the first 18 months of his life," she wrote. The mother noted that she doesn't want to come across as ungrateful to parents who have lost a child. She admitted that she and her husband both had moments of thinking that their lives would be easier if their son did not exist. "My husband and I both have..."
Wait. There is not a parent on this planet whose lives would not be easier without a second child or a third child or a child in general. For some reason, that phrase absolutely makes no sense to me when people say that, because having if you're one to imagine a world in which a child is not a financial or stressful burden under any circumstance whatsoever, you're living in a fanciful dream world that does not exist. It just wouldn't have been as much of a burden on us if we hadn't had a third child. Well, no kidding. That's why you tone down your cost of living to the bare minimum that you possibly can. And you want to get rid of things like cigarettes and alcohol, things like that will cost you too much money. You want to get rid of perhaps your cable TV bill. You don't really need that. There's all sorts of stuff that you can do to cut down your costs.
Oh, but we can't get rid of the cable. What would we do for a babysitter?
The thing is, it's wanting parents that don't want to make sacrifices. That's the bottom line. She's like, well, I don't love this child because it's making me make sacrifices. That's unbelievable.
Oh yeah, because now you got to get a new room for the baby, and you got to do this, you got to do that, yeah. Let's go ahead and hate the son because it's his fault. It's his fault that you decided that you were gonna have a fun time. Yeah, it's definitely his fault to blame.
My husband and I both had a period where if he had died in his sleep, we would have felt relief, she confessed. It is possible that the anonymous mother might have been suffering from postnatal depression, which affects more than 1 in 10 women within a year of giving birth, according to NHS. Symptoms can include difficulty bonding with your baby, a persistently low mood, and insomnia. End of article. Any final thoughts before we move on?
What they described is the results of having a child. That's why this postnatal depression and things like that. What are you talking about? Welcome to being a parent. And parents can back me up on here. I don't even have any children. I know parents will back me up. Welcome to being a parent.
Well,
it is responsibility.
From perspective, I can tell you that being pregnant messes with your hormones big time. And having a baby messes with your hormones big time. So yeah, I can understand some women going through severe depression and anxiety after giving birth. Because yeah, there are major hormonal changes in a woman's body in having a baby or in being pregnant.
Okay, but you see these people like, actually I'll take that. One of the things I've seen in the Black community, since we'll just connect that over, is I've seen a lot of loyalty from the sons to their mothers. I've seen that, where you'll have the single mom, she works real hard, she takes care of her mother life, and there's a lot of loyalty there. And basically, you say anything bad about his mom, I mean, he goes to war against you over that. And I've seen that kind of attitude before come out of them, which I'm not saying is wrong. He wants to defend his mother, he wants to do good unto her and all that. But when you hear him talk about her, do you hear this? You say, well, don't you ever say anything bad about my mom because she hated me from birth and she didn't want me to be alive, and you're not going to talk bad about her. That's not what you hear. You hear, my mom sacrificed and she worked hard for me and I'm going to do whatever I can to, do good unto her. That's what you hear them say, isn't it? Well, it's called making a sacrifice. This woman doesn't want to make a sacrifice for that. She's feeling her life has been inconvenienced. Well, if your life's inconvenienced by that, then don't have children in the first place. But you made your decision. You made your bed. Now do what you're supposed to be doing. And the problem is she's like, well, I want some advice and help from people. No, you don't. You want something that's going to something that's going to scratch your itching ear. Because if you really want advice, what is this really coming down to? Is it coming down to money? Is it coming down? What is it? Because whatever's going on in her life, I'd almost guarantee she's on prescription drugs of some sort, which is causing part of the problem. I'd almost guarantee her and her husband are on either on alcohol or smoking something, because that's typically what happens in those kind of situations. I'd almost guarantee that they're doing a whole bunch of things, and whether you go along the lines of unhealthy eating and all sorts of stuff that can be causing problems like that. Just basic things they can clean up out of their lives. But when I go through that kind of list, they're not going to want to listen to me. They're not going to hear one word I have to say because they don't really want any help or advice what to do. They want somebody to help them justify how they feel. And I'm not willing to play that game.
And if there's no more thoughts, I'll go to the next article, which is also from The Independent, titled, Mother Speaks Out After Viral Photo Showing Her Baby on Airport Floor Sparks Outrage. An Illinois mother has spoken out against a stranger shared photo online, which showed her looking at her phone in Colorado airport whilst her baby lay unattended on a blanket on the floor. The image went viral when it was uploaded to Facebook alongside the caption which accused her of being an idiot. The post has since been removed from the site. Now, Molly Lensing has explained the circumstances behind the controversial snap. A technical glitch with Delta had left Lensing stranded in the airport for more than 20 hours with her then 2-month-old daughter.
Wait, she was in the airport for 20 hours?
Yes. There was a technical...
20 hours?
More
Folks,
than 20
you want to
hours.
know, okay, you want to know what a headache's like? Go be stuck in an airport for 20 hours. Okay, you don't even know. I can barely stand being in an airport for 20 minutes, not 20 hours. Plus, I decided to go on Google because I guarantee this is on Google Images. I looked it up, found it, I'm looking at it. There is nothing wrong with what she's doing. There's a woman beside her that's got this little disgruntled face of judgment on her. This baby is on the floor on a blanket right next to her mother's feet. She is not in any walking range whatsoever. The mother's on her phone. She had been in that airport for 20 hours. She put the baby down because guess what? She doesn't have anything else to hold the baby in. She would have to have her in her arms for 20 hours straight. You try carrying a baby for 20 hours. I don't care if it's man or woman, you're going to get tired. And the baby will want to get down the floor so everything can stretch out and kick around because that's what they do. They're babies. Okay? There is absolutely nothing wrong with what she's doing. But a lot of the people that are going to make judgments at her are people that don't have children. I'd almost guarantee it. Okay, here, I'm going to make another comment. Let me give you this real quick. Crime of crimes. I'm going to give you my grandmother, who is deceased. Okay, she's dead now, so you can't come after her. In the afternoon, because she had 4 children, in the afternoon, her children would take a nap. And so she would put them down for a nap, and she knew exactly how long they were going to sleep. Like a little over an hour, but she knew down to the minute how long they were going to sleep. And so she would walk uptown here. We have a very small grocery store in our small town. She would walk uptown, gather up the groceries, everything she needed, bought it, bring it home, and she would be home just in time for them when they were just starting to wake up. Today, what people do is they would call social services and have her arrested or have her children taken away because you're abandoning your children. You're leaving them at home. She has a husband that works out all day. She's got to go get groceries, and she doesn't want to haul 4 children with her up to the grocery store because it's going to take at least twice as long to get that stuff done, and they're asleep. It's not a big deal. They're sleeping. What are they going to get into? So she puts them down for their nap. She goes and gets groceries, comes back, and everything's fine. She used to do it all the time. But you see, the mothers typically know better on how to judge what their children need in most instances. I realize there are some mothers out there that could care less. I realize there are some feminist mothers, God forbid, feminist mothers who could care less about their children and don't really take care of them much at all. And I understand we have to watch out for stuff like that. But that woman's not doing anything wrong. Leave her alone.
The article continues, exhausted and depressed to speak to her, exhausted and desperate to speak to her family to let them know she would be delayed. She briefly lay Anastasia down on the floor in front of her. Anastasia had been held or in her carry for many hours, Lending said. My arms were tired. She needed a stretch, and I had to communicate with all the family members, wondering...
I'm a guy. How could I possibly know that's what she was struggling with? Do you think anybody has the possibility of just stopping for 10 seconds and thinking about her situation? But no, we're going to stare at a photograph, look at a caption, and then we're going to condemn her to hell.
That's what I was just about to say. I was like, who took this photo? Who took this photo and decided to make an entire argument about it? There wasn't anything interesting, anything else interesting at the airport, especially in this.
13-year-old girl, what you want to bet, took this photo and was like, guys, like, do you see, like what she's doing here? Can you believe this? That's what's going on.
After the photo went viral, Lensing was nervous that a coworker would see the image and that it would compromise her credibility as a part-time pediatric nurse. Though she wasn't named in the image, some people managed to find her on Facebook and send her messages calling her a terrible parent.
Oh yeah, by the way, I just want to make mention. I'm going to make, somebody commented on our chat, I'm going to make mention of something. First of all, I want to say my grandmother, all of her children lived. And they were perfectly healthy until they destroyed their own health later on through their horrible eating habits and lifestyles. But, well, not all of them. My dad did a pretty good job. But my sister also said, she also told me that she had done the same thing my grandmother did, to put him down for a nap, went to pick up some groceries and come back. She got reported to Child Protective Services by a neighbor for that. Both of her children are perfectly healthy and alive right now. They didn't die. There wasn't like, okay, Tanya, all right, let's say my sister, you know, sadly, she had secret nuclear warhead codes, and her babies just happened to get on the phone and release those codes to the Russians while she was out and getting groceries, and just nuclear war started. Because, I mean, this is ridiculous. Again, a lot of the people that are doing this, and I guarantee that the person who actually tweeted this stuff originally doesn't want their information posted. Did they give any information, Josh, on there about who this person was?
I don't believe they did.
Well, there you go. They'll release all sorts of information about the mother, but not the person who posted it. That's a real interesting question. Probably because they wanted to protect the person's privacy, and they probably did that because the person's underage.
Lensing has said that her shaming experience should be a lesson to those who deem it acceptable to publicly judge a stranger's parenting techniques online. She added that the incident felt like an absolute violation of her privacy, given that she wasn't even aware the photo had been taken. End of article.
And, you know, this kind of reminds me a little bit of another photo that went viral of a bunch of kids in an art museum, and they're all sitting there under this painting, and they're all on their phones. And there's saying, you know, why aren't they doing this? You know, why are they all on their phones and not paying attention to what's going on? Well, it just so happened, you know, when you hear the rest of the story, that the museum had an app that could be downloaded on the phones that gives information about all of these paintings, and that's what the kids were doing.
They were downloading the app so they could learn about the paintings as they were looking at them, right?
Well, they were actually looking at the app and reading the information on this painting from the app. They had the app on their phones.
Yeah, so the media has done a lot to help that, and I guarantee that the media has done a lot to corrupt a lot of the things that we've talked about today, and all the stories we've talked about today have used these images to do that kind of thing. And I won't even go to the details on that because I've done that before and other stuff, but there you go.
Were there any more thoughts on this, anything we discussed today before we close?
As far as thoughts, no. I think we pretty much hit home on anything, especially the first article. You know, if nothing else, I want people to understand, you know, first and foremost, you gotta look at the root of the problem. You know, sometimes, you know, like just like the examples that we've shown, not everything, you know, not anything released in the media is as is always said. You know, I want first and foremost for people to get on the foundation of the Word of God. That'll fix everything. You get on the foundation of the Word of God first and foremost. That'll fix everything. That'll fix the problem with police brutality. That'll fix problem within the Black community. That'll fix problem, you know, everywhere. You know, that's first and foremost. If there's any more thoughts to be said, you know, get right with God. It's easy. It's too easy. So.
Yeah. And did anybody have anything else to say? I completely agree with what Daedric said, and yeah. And everybody, thank you everybody who has watched today. And if you want to join us on the forum, you can do that by going to the link in the description, which takes you to the forum. You can read comments for this video and comment on it yourself. You can even make an account and have discussions with us throughout the week. Just introduce yourself so we know a little bit about you and who we're talking with. And Lord willing, we're going to see you next week.